Let's take the vote yet again as we continue to wait for all the votes to be cast there. This is a live picture on the House floor. So in the meantime, we're going to be bringing into the conversation some reporters who cover Capitol Hill each and every day to help us make sense of and explain what is going on there on the House floor. So you can see there, we're still waiting for about 23 of these members who have not voted just yet. But if you're just getting up to speed on this story, that was Speaker Johnson from mere minutes ago, who was very confident that this new retooled spending bill will pass. Well, according to our reporters down there on the ground on Capitol Hill, it's not looking so good for Republicans. Aisha Hasni saying now there are 33 no's in the GOP column. And since she tweeted that, that number has grown by 3, now 36 no's in the GOP column here. And so remember, we are very, very close to a government shutdown. The deadline is tomorrow night at midnight. And lawmakers, they want to get out of town for the Christmas break. But if this fails, which it's looking like it's going to, they might have to stay even longer to fund the government here. So wanted to make sure you're up to speed on all of these developments. If we hear from any more lawmakers, we'll make sure to bring you those live as well. But remember, yesterday, about this very time, this kind of blew up on the launch pad, so to speak, because President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance opposed it very vociferously and vehemently, coming out against it, and then adding another request about the debt ceiling in particular. And so this new retooled spending bill has an extension of the debt ceiling limit until 2027. And that is why many Democrats are now opposed to this, in addition to a number of line items that were included in the previous one that are now not included in this one here. So we're still waiting for members there to vote. We've got about 21 members left to cast their vote, but this is not looking good for House Republicans here. So in the meantime, we do want to keep this up. I'm Andrew Kraft. We're approaching the top of the hour. It's almost 7 o'clock Eastern in our nation's capital on the House floor. And we have some more votes being tallied there as we continue to wait to see whether or not this officially will fail. It is on track, though, to fail. We can say that with certainty here. Let's listen.
5-1 voting present, 2/3 not being in the affirmative. The rules are not suspended and the bill is not passed. Oh, thank you. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.
All right, so there you have it. You saw there that the rule to suspend has failed. Now, what that means, I know that's parliamentary language there, but this did not require just a simple majority to pass. Lawmakers needed 2/3 of the House chamber in order to get this over the finish line, because there is this rule in place known as the 72-hour rule. When legislation is introduced, it gives lawmakers 72 hours to review it. Lawmakers there, Republicans, wanted to do away with that rule because time is of the essence. The government shutdown deadline is tomorrow at midnight. Obviously, that's not 72 hours. And so that is what they were trying to do. But that has ultimately come up unsuccessful for House Republicans led by Speaker Johnson. We have a live picture there in the halls on Capitol Hill. So we'll see whether or not Speaker Johnson comes up to the microphone yet again. We'll see whether or not the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, comes up to the podium yet again here. But we do have a live picture there at the White House as well. Before the vote took place, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, put out a statement saying this: Republicans are doing the bidding of their billionaire benefactors at the expense of hardworking Americans. Republicans are breaking their word to support a bipartisan agreement that would lower prescription drug costs and make it harder to offshore jobs to China, and instead putting forward a bill that paves the way for tax breaks for billionaires while cutting critical programs working families count on, from Social Security to Head Start. President Biden supports the bipartisan agreement to keep the government open, help communities recovering from disasters, and lower costs, not this giveaway for billionaires that Republicans are proposing at the 11th hour. Back out live to the halls of the Capitol, that was the White House press secretary with a statement on how President Biden feels about this. And we have from Reese Gorman, our friend there at Notice, there that the new Trump-endorsed Republican CR, that stands for Continuing Resolution, fails. 174, 235, and one abstention, it looks like. So only 174 members voted for it. 38 Republicans voted against it. You just heard from Speaker Johnson that he was confident that this would pass, and it has not here. So back to square one for lawmakers on what to do about funding the government before this deadline tomorrow at midnight here. Let's bring into the conversation our friend there at Fox News Radio who covers all things Capitol Hill, Ryan Schmelz. He joins me. Ryan, good to see you. And so this going down, and you heard there Speaker Johnson, he was quite optimistic that this was going to pass. Not entirely sure if that was genuine there. 38 Republicans in his conference voted against it here, and the no's, or at least the commitment to no, they were coming out in the wake of the legislative text being released just this afternoon here. What happens next, Ryan?
I think that's the question we're all asking, Andrew. You know, that number that you just showed there, the amount of no votes on this bill, is got to be concerning for anyone who wanted to see this specific bill pass. The fact you have 35 Republicans, and it looked like almost every single Democrat who was against this, 235 people voting against this, shows a sign that even if they were to go through what we thought was going to be the next plan, which was that since it didn't pass under suspension, which is, 2/3 majority, that they would go through what was called the Rules Committee. Then they would go to the Rules Committee. If it passes out of the Rules Committee, then they bring it up to the floor. And all it has to do after that is just get a simple majority. But to see Democrats being as unified around this as they were, that's a sign that this might not pass, and they may have to go back to the drawing board. So I think there's a lot of questions about what happens next now.
So, Ryan, obviously we had this statement in from both Trump and Vance at this time yesterday, essentially tanking the first iteration of the funding package. And then House Republicans had to scramble and put forth a new package, and we saw kind of the paper difference, so to speak. The new iteration was only about 116 pages compared to 1,500 plus pages yesterday. But I have in front of me the post on Truth Social. Trump endorsed this latest continuing resolution, this latest funding round here. He says Speaker Mike Johnson and the House have come to a very good deal for the American people. He called it a very good deal. 38 House Republicans, they didn't think it was a very good deal. Why? What was in this one or not in this one compared to the previous one yesterday?
So I think there's two things that stand out right now. Number one, the fact that they lifted the debt ceiling for the next 2 years or so. That was a big problem for a lot of Republicans, including Chip Roy, who earlier in the day, President Trump actually put out a statement condemning Chip Roy and asking for a primary for Chip Roy. He's now one of the first voices to come out and be against this. And you saw that number continue to grow throughout the day, where it got to over 30 Republicans voting against it. So the extension of the debt ceiling was the big issue here. And then you also have the big issue of the fact that this was put on the floor just a few hours after they came to some type of agreement with it. So the fact that it was not even, it violated the 72-hour rule. If a matter of fact, there's probably like what, the 4, 5, 6 hour rule, less than that maybe. So I think those were the big issues that the Republicans who voted no against this did. And there might be some Republicans out there who argue this was worse than what they initially had issues with the previous bill. The issue of the previous bill was that simply it was going to add to the national debt. It was too bloated, had too much spending in it. This one, in some ways, you have Republicans out there who think that it may have greenlit spending and greenlit debt increases to a level that was higher than the previous bill. So I think those are some of the things holding it back.
So, Ryan, for viewers who don't know what the debt ceiling is, in layman's terms, what is it, if you could here? Because in that package that just failed, Republicans wanted it extended to 2027. How would that have benefited them? What did that mean?
Well, essentially, it's a cap on where they can go in terms of the debt. So I think President-elect Trump knew that this was going to be a battle the minute that he got into office, that they were going to have a debate about, raising the debt ceiling. And usually whenever there's a debt ceiling agreement, Andrew, it usually takes some time. And there's a lot of negotiation and a lot of conditions that have to be met. So to do this in a very short amount of time was quite the obstacle to pull off. And clearly they weren't able to pull that off here.
I mean, that's, I think, what has led so many people kind of scratching their heads, because all throughout, this was just going to be a short-term stopgap funding measure. The Trump-Vance administration, they will be sworn in. They'll take the oath January 20th. The debt ceiling limit was not a part of any of these negotiations until Trump made it so yesterday here. Are Republicans mad about that?
Not that I've heard of in terms of any type of anger towards the fact that the debt was included in this. Now, it could change in the matter of hours. This is all still very new, and there's still a lot of moving parts here. I mean, I can't think of something on Capitol Hill that moved this quickly and had this many changes in a short period of time, really, since we had Speaker McCarthy get ousted, and you had speaker elections going nonstop. You had people who were nominated for speaker who had to win over votes, and there were a lot of closed-door meetings going on. But in this situation, there's just been a lot of moving parts, a lot of meetings that have been going on behind closed doors. So to get the pulse on Republicans in terms of how angry they are or how frustrated they are, it's kind of hard to know. But I think there's been kind of this battle line that's been drawn, where you have Republicans who want to get the government funded and they just want to get into the Trump administration and take care of things when he takes office. And there's others who say, well, no, we've got to do it a certain way, and we can't be setting a bad tone, especially when we talk about the DOGE and cutting government waste and cutting government spending. And this is the deal we come up with. That's kind of the argument you hear from those who really don't like where they've been going over the last two bills.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, you think about winners and losers in this story, in this situation, in this scenario. A lot of House Democrats have been trolling their Republican colleagues and the president-elect. Hakeem Jeffries called this the Musk-Johnson proposal. He said the proposal is not serious. He says it's laughable. He says extreme MAGA Republicans are driving us to a government shutdown. But now Republicans are essentially using the fact that almost every Democrat voted against this, and they are saying that the Democrats own this shutdown here. So it's interesting to see the spin on both sides about who is claiming or not claiming the government shutdown. But Caroline Leavitt, the incoming White House press secretary, put out a statement over all of this trolling by Democrats, saying as soon as President Trump released his official stance on the CR, Republicans on Capitol Hill echoed his point of view. President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party, full stop. This, Ryan, after so many House Democrats were referring to Elon Musk as President Musk. Some were referring to Elon Musk as the fourth branch of government. The trolling was off the charts there.
And I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, whether or not they get this funding deal, situated and they get something in order here that's going to lead to the government being funded. The reality is that we've created a situation right now, and Congress has created a situation right now where Democrats are going to consistently try to create this sense of tension between President-elect Trump as well as Elon Musk. They're going to make this argument that Elon Musk is the true leader of the Republican Party and that is not President-elect Trump. I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. And, I think that Republicans also, like you just said, are going to try to paint this as the Democrat shutdown because the new bill that they negotiated still had a lot of the key parts of the previous bill. It had the continuation of government funding. It had the continuation, or it had money in there for disaster relief. So Republicans believe that as long as they had those core things in there, that Democrats would jump on board, but Democrats decided not to. And I think one of the big issues Democrats have with this is the fact that Speaker Johnson went off, broke off of a deal that he negotiated with the Senate. And so I think the argument is that, well, how can we trust you in the future when you break what we agreed to before? So getting Democrats on board with a lot of these bills may be a problem for Republicans in the future.
All right, so Chad Pergram quoting Jamie Raskin, the Democrat from Maryland today. So who is our leader Hakeem Jeffries is supposed to negotiate with? Is it Mike Johnson? Is he the Speaker of the House, or is it Donald Trump, or is it Elon Musk, or is it somebody else? Back out live to our shot there on Capitol Hill. Ryan, if you could, just tell our viewers where this is in the Capitol. Off screen, you can't see him. Republican Congressman from Texas, Chip Roy. He's being interviewed right now. I mean, Ryan, we got to talk about Chip Roy. President-elect Donald Trump today came out and said Chip Roy essentially should be primaried for his opposition to this interim spending bill that just went down. What's going on there? What are the dynamics? Why is Trump coming out so strongly against Roy?
So Chip Roy and Donald Trump have had a relationship that's been strained for a number of years now. So it all started when Chip Roy, first of all, decided not to he decided to certify the 2020 election results. He said that, Congress does not have the right to overturn the election results. He felt that there was not enough fraud that was proven in order to overturn the election results. So that irked Donald Trump when he made that decision. And then later on, Chip Roy essentially decides to endorse Ron DeSantis over President-elect Trump during the GOP primary. So that's kind of been building up as something that's frustrated Donald Trump over the last 2 years, over the last 4 years, honestly. But Chip Roy has been somebody who's been closely aligned with a lot of conservative Republicans. I believe he was closely aligned with Matt Gaetz. He is a member of the Freedom Caucus. He actually has a leadership position in the Freedom Caucus. But because of that, you have more of the moderate members like the Kevin McCarthy's of the world. Derek Van Orden from Wisconsin, some other ones out there who are closely aligned with Donald Trump, but may align with the more moderate wing of the party, who've been very critical of Chip Roy, and they've kind of utilized this moment to attack Chip Roy. So Chip Roy's been somebody who he's got some close allies in Congress, but that group might be small, and some of the opposition includes President-elect Trump, and it goes all the way back to the start when he decided to certify the election results in 2020, and then he decided to endorse Ron DeSantis. So those are the two key pillars right there.
Yeah, and we'll get that Truth Social post. I want to read it out of what his threats are against Chip Roy. Before we do just that, though, I mean, I want to talk about the reality now at play because you're in this weird limbo period. Yes, the 118th Congress will end come January the 3rd. The new 119th Congress will be sworn in, but the government needs to be funded for however long until the new Congress comes in here. So I wanted to ask you, are Republicans being too bullish and optimistic about their very, very slim majority? Yes, you heard Speaker Johnson there claim that President-elect Trump, won the election with a mandate, with a landslide here. But the majority is so narrow and slim still in the House. Do they need a reality check with respect to that, Ryan?
Well, they're in a very tough situation where, They have, yes. They have the majority in the House. They've got some negotiating power there. But Andrew, they still have a Democrat controlled Senate that's led by Leader Schumer, and they still have a White House led by President Biden that's going to be the one that has to sign whatever they send to him into law. So the negotiating power for Speaker Johnson has never been that good. But does that excuse maybe some of the criticism that Republicans have with how he went about this process? I'm not quite sure. Now, yes, when we talk about the majority, when Republicans take office in January, they will have control of the Senate. They will have control of the House, but they're in such a small majority in the House. I think it's actually smaller than what they have right now, where it's at the point where if they have one defection or two defections, any bill they have could fail. Or if even a member doesn't make it in town in time for a vote, or they have a medical procedure, whatnot, attendance is going to be huge next Congress. So I think the idea, and at least some Republicans have said to me, that the best solution is just get through this period and get to the next Congress where, yes, the majority will still be slim, but when you have John Thune running the Senate, you have President-elect Trump running the White House, things will at least be a little bit easier. But how they get there is still going to be the mystery because they've got a lot of obstacles that we just laid out there that are going to be in that way.
Okay, so we have this Truth Social post from Trump there on Chip Roy. He says he calls him the very unpopular congressman in quotations from Texas. Chip Roy is getting in the way, as usual, of having yet another great Republican victory, all for the sake of some cheap publicity for himself. He says Republican obstructionists have to be done away with. And then he went on to threaten to primary Chip Roy there. So I wanted to make sure we have the entire post there on Truth Social.
It's a long one.
You can see it's a long one there. But in the meantime, Ryan, as we continue to watch this shot here to see if any of these lawmakers do decide to speak with reporters there, can we talk about the particulars of what was in this? I was getting a lot of questions. We covered Hurricane Milton and Hurricane Helene so extensively here on Live Now from Fox. You had Republican lawmakers from North Carolina say they were not going to vote for something that did not include disaster relief funds for North Carolina here. Is that in this?
Yes, it is. I'm actually just pulling that up, and I'm not actually looking at my phone. I'm just seeing, yeah, they had a clean 3-month CR. You had a clean farm bill package, which was big for a lot of Republicans and also Midwestern Democrats. You have extensions for PB or extenders, but it does not have PBM reform. But then you also have $110 billion in disaster aid. So that's why you see somebody like Anna Paulina Luna from Florida. Her district was hit pretty hard by the recent hurricanes, both Milton and Helene. She's never voted for a CR before. She was out there on the floor arguing for the CR. So she's somebody who was going to support this, but that was not enough to get all the Republicans on board that you needed to. And like we said before, the previous bill did not have an increase in the debt limit. This one did all the way until 2027. That was a huge issue for a number of Republicans. That's why you saw over 30 of them vote against this. So what they're going to do in terms of doing a clean CR and figuring out what to do with the debt limit, that's kind of the big question moving forward, I think.
Okay, so it's not only disaster relief funding that I was getting questions about. There was a lot of back and forth about whether or not a pay increase for lawmakers was going to be included in this. They haven't gotten a pay increase in some time. Was that in this iteration that just failed or no?
We did not see it in here. So it looks like that the pay increase for lawmakers was taken out. It was around $6,000 a year, I believe, was the number that we saw in the initial bill. Some of the other things that were taken out, there was a land transfer that would have put RFK Stadium in the hands of Washington, D.C. and not the federal government, opening the door for the Washington Commanders to get a new stadium down the road. There was some misinformation about that. There was an accusation that there was money that was being given from the federal government to Washington, D.C. for a stadium. That was not the case. It was simply a land transfer. There was also a number of bills in there that had to do with PBM reform related to healthcare policy. Those bills were all taken out of this one. So PBM reform, the RFK Stadium deal, as well as the, what was the other thing we talked about? It was the pay raise for members of Congress. Those were the three things taken out. And there were a couple other things too. But essentially, that watered down the bill where you went from over what was 1,500 pages down to just under 200 pages. So I think it was like under around 160 or so.
All right, Ryan Schmelz, we can't thank you enough. We know this is somewhat complicated because this is, language that the American people, especially viewers, they don't come by every day. Like you, you're on Capitol Hill almost every day covering this here. Some of your colleagues in the press corps, they're staking out, that's what we call it, lawmakers, just to get their reaction. But it seems like that's the moral of the story right now is lawmakers are back to square one. So, Ryan, does the government shut down tomorrow at midnight?
We'll have to wait and see. I think one thing that Chad Pergram, our senior congressional correspondent, was pointing out earlier is that watch what Leader Schumer in the Senate does next. Does he put his own bill on the floor? And does he try to pass that through the Senate, where there's usually a lot less disagreement about something like keeping the government open, and then send that back over to the House and see what they do about it? I think that's maybe the next thing to watch. If not, I would expect a lot more closed door meetings in Speaker Johnson's office, figuring out how they can get this forward and how they can get Democrats on board, because it just looks like right now passing a government funding package and avoiding a government shutdown without Democrats' input is going to be very hard to do.
So, if that doesn't happen, can you envision, though, lawmakers go home for the holiday recess, or will they stay in Washington to figure this out?
I would say they probably stay through the weekend and try to figure out something that they can vote on either Monday or Tuesday. I think that's probably the next best play here. If they can't figure something out by tomorrow, because keep in mind, a lot of the government closes on the weekends anyway. So it would be a very partial government shutdown, but it's what happens when you get to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of next week, and then after the Christmas holiday. So they've got some time where they're not in full panic mode, but how long does that panic mode last, or the lack of panic mode last? I think that's where the issue comes out.
Ryan, we're talking about winners and losers. Just lastly, I keep coming up with questions to ask you. You're so knowledgeable. Speaker Johnson, does he come out of this entire fight unscathed?
As of right now, I don't think he does. No, this was a big issue for him, and there were a lot of members who had issues with how he went about negotiating this. I cannot tell you the amount of people I've talked to, source-wise, who have said that whoever is advising Speaker Johnson on this did not do a good job, because this turned into a huge nightmare for him. I mean, there's not even just conservative Republicans who are mad. There's moderate Republicans who are mad about this. So I think there's some who give him slack because the situation he's in is not the easiest one. You have a very small majority in the House. You have the Senate run by Democrats. You have the White House run by a Democrat too. So whatever he comes up with was always going to be an issue no matter what he did. But it just seems like this one really irked a lot of people the wrong way. 1,500 pages with a lot of different things in there, a lot of different bills. And obviously the spending number was a concern. And plus, let's not forget, Andrew, that he forewent the 72-hour rule that he had said he was going to abide by. We were expecting this bill text, Andrew, on Sunday. We got it Tuesday night. That was a huge issue for a lot of people, just that in and of itself, and the fact that they were expecting to have a vote on that with less than 24 hours later. So there was a lot in here that rubbed a lot of Republicans the wrong way. So I do think that his speakership could be on the rocks. And I think, as one source said, January just got a lot messier.
Yeah, I mean, does Speaker Johnson's future, is it contingent on Donald Trump's support? Fox's Brooks Singman spoke to Trump today, and he told her that Johnson will, quote, easily remain Speaker for the next Congress if he acts decisively and tough. So that's a kind of conditional phrase there. That's a big if, right, in Trump's mind, or no?
I think it is, yes. I think his support among President-elect Trump is going to be huge for whether or not he stays Speaker or not. I think that he's going to have at least one hard no matter what Donald Trump does or not. That's going to be Thomas Massie. He's already come out and said that he's against Speaker Johnson as Speaker next Congress. And, keep in mind, Massie, while he does support Trump in some ways. He's not exactly the biggest Trump loyalist. And he was actually one of the first Republicans to be critical of this new CR deal, where he said, well, why are we doing a CR and an extension of the debt limit? That was something that Speaker McCarthy did, and he got ousted for. So Thomas Massey's probably going to be one of those who's going to be at least be a no when it comes January. But what everyone else does, I think that does depend on how he handles this situation moving forward, but also what President-elect Trump ultimately decides on Johnson's future.
I mean, some Republicans in the House, Ryan, they're polling their social media audience about this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, would you support Elon Musk for Speaker of the House? The House controls policy and appropriations, their spending, and can cut programs, departments, agencies, as well as make new laws like term limits and pass a balanced budget amendment. DOGE could become the legislative branch. What is she talking about? And remind the viewers, anyone can be Speaker of the House, right? It doesn't have to be an elected member of the House, does it?
You do not have to be a member of the House to be the Speaker of the House. And yes, Elon Musk would be somebody who could, I guess, technically become Speaker of the House. He has the qualifications. He would be third in line to the president, but he would not be able to become the president because he is not a natural born citizen. He was born outside the country. So if there was an event where the Speaker of the House was next in line to the president, they would skip over him. I believe that's how it would work. So yes, this is kind of a social media campaign that's going on right now. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene floating the idea. You have Rand Paul and Mike Lee in the Senate who've been floating the idea. So whether or not that's going to be legitimate or not, we'll have to wait and see. But yes, that's been kind of teased by a number of lawmakers, just at least on social media, to get attention.
All right, Ryan Schmelz, as always, with Fox News Radio. You're a great source of information. Thank you for helping us make sense of what just happened, and we'll just have to follow it. Time is of the essence for these lawmakers there. Ryan, thanks so much.
Of course. Thank you, Andrew.
All right, in the meantime here, hope you found that informative. Hope you found that as some form of clarity. I know it is somewhat arcane and complex to talk about all of these House rules here. We still have this live vantage point, and we're just waiting to see whether or not any lawmakers, including and especially Republicans there, will speak to the reporters gathered about what just went down. So what did just go down? Well, the newest iteration of the funding package, it's known as a continuing resolution. That means it's a short-term stopgap funding measure to keep the government open in the short term. Well, that second iteration that was agreed upon today, it failed. And so you saw the vote. You watched the vote happen live. I have this from Aisha Hasni there on Capitol Hill, saying that Senator Markwayne Mullin, the Republican from Oklahoma, just told Laura Ingraham on the Ingraham Angle, these 38 Republicans, some of which Trump saved in November, just gave Schumer and the Dems leverage and took away any leverage Trump had. So it seems like there's some back and forth, some party infighting there. Cami Mondo, our friend there at the Washington Examiner, she helped us make sense of this story yesterday, said this. One House Republican texted her, on to Plan C. Remember, this was Plan B. It failed. And one Republican texting her, on to Plan C. So wanted to make sure we got that in there as well. In the meantime there, it does look like you might recognize some of our colleagues and contemporaries there on Capitol Hill. That looks like Cami Mondo right there from the Washington Examiner. And we always thank Cami for her reporting in real time about all the goings on Capitol Hill. All right, so wanted to do kind of the first half hour of this hour with some of these live pictures there on the floor. It does like on the Senate side, we do have some members speaking. That's Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. Let's just listen. Let's see if she's talking about what just happened in the House.
Program for an additional 5 years. This is to ensure that eligible individuals and their heirs can receive their rightful lands. These are
Okay, so it looks like they're talking about other business there on the House floor. That's Senator Murkowski, the Republican from Alaska. All right, I'm Andrew Kraft. We want to thank you for being with us here on this very busy Thursday. As to what that House Republican texted Cami Mondo, on to Plan C. Well, what is that going to look like, and will President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Vance get involved with some of these negotiations with House Republican leadership to avert a government shutdown. Remember, that deadline is tomorrow night at midnight, and so we'll just have to wait and see. We'll see you in 2 minutes.